Okay, guys, this is the saga of me and Lonesome Louie Houston. It's a twisted tale, which won't surprise anybody. It will likely involve a series of posts, maybe even three or four of them, because it weaves in and out of other stories I've told. And I just wanted to warn you all that beforehand, because these characters I've known in my time, they deserve their minute, especially this guy. So I met Louis in the fall of 1966 when I was living in my car, a rusty 57 Plymouth that I'd driven down from Longview after flunking the draft. In the meanwhile, I'd worked loading and unloading watermelon trucks and painting houses. But my main emphasis was on this new passion of mine, exploring the vagaries of alcoholism, or being a drunk, basically. So I pursued it so avidly, in fact, that it had left me broke and, living in a car, which wasn't so bad. I do it often enough in the future. And it wasn't even that bad. It was still warm in the Bay Area that time of year, so I could roll down the back window and stick my feet out when I went to sleep. And because that Plymouth, the brakes usually didn't work, so I wasn't tempted to drive it while drinking. And then Nick the Nihilist, who worked at Delta Airlines, got me an interview there. Now, normally I would have been shown the door immediately. They prefer neat, clean-cut characters. But they gave me this timed deductive reasoning test, and I did so well that they figured they could stash me on Graveyard, which is what they did. And I worked as a ramp agent, loading and unloading jets, as if that took advanced deductive reasoning. The watermelons were more complicated. But given that it was graveyard, and there were only three planes that came in or out, there was a crew of only four of us. Basically, two loaded and unloaded the jets, and the others took the bags off the chutes, stacked them, and took them out to the planes. And because I was so tall, I couldn't fit in the baggage compartments, so they assigned me to the chutes, where my partner was Lonesome Louie. Someone had given him that nickname before I ever arrived, and that was because he rarely smiled or spoke. He was an ostensibly very bright 25-year-old guy, average size, from San Angelo, Texas, and he wore these black horn-rimmed glasses, and he worked like a demon. Good Lord. So hard, in fact, that after some failed attempts at keeping up with him, I figured, let him have at it. Decided he was just one of those guys who'd rather do it all himself. Now that I think of it, that's where the deductive reasoning came in. Anyway, contributing to that decision, I'm sure, was how drunk or hungover I usually was at that time of the morning. So while Louis whirred around with the bags, I would pull up a chair to the end of the baggage chute and, chain smoke cigarettes and think about life. We'd never formally discussed this arrangement, but I figured, if he didn't agree with it, he'd say something, right? In the meanwhile, as time went by, I started coming in drunker and drunker because we didn't have any supervisor on Graveyard. And the next thing I knew, I woke up in one of the tall storage lockers that were downstairs there. And apparently Lonesome had found me passed out beneath a chute, had dragged me over there, stood me up in the locker, and then slammed the door. I ruminate to this day on how did that work? When I woke up, I figured I was in a coffin. And how was I still standing up, passed out? I was still trying to make sense of that when Louis came back and let me out. He took me over to the bench and sat me down because my legs were asleep. And he started telling me that he'd hid me so that no one would see the condition I was in, which amazed me almost as much as hearing him speak in full sentences. And finally I said, "Hey, Louie, why'd you go to all that bother for me?" And he said, "Because I don't want you to get fired. I like working with you." And I said, "Really? But I don't do any work." And he said, "Exactly. You're a very weird duck, Park." And I said, "Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that." And so that morning, when we were leaving work, he asked me if it were true that I lived in that horrible old car of mine. And I said, it wasn't so bad now that I'd plugged the brake fluid vial. And just like that, he says he has an extra bedroom at his apartment in Millbrae, just up the road, and I'm welcome to move in there if I want. And I said, "Thanks, Louie, but, I drink up all my money. How much would the rent be?" And he goes, "Oh, I've got plenty of money, Park, and you wouldn't have to pay any rent at all. All I ask is that you never speak to me unless you absolutely have to." And I thought, who were these angels I've known? Bless their kind, enabling souls. I mean, a mute roommate and free rent? Seriously? This was my dream. How could it keep getting better than the firehouse or the whorehouse? So I stuck out my hand. "Hey, buddy, put her there."